everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of the Stray Dog Footy podcast. This is Frodo, coming to you from COVID Central, also known as Florida, and I hope you are staying safe and healthy wherever you are. To illustrate where we are right now as a society, at least in my little bubble of it, I cannot remember the last time someone replied to a sneeze with "God bless you," or even a hearty "Gesundheit." Anytime anyone sneezes, coughs, or even clears their throat now, someone inevitably yells, "COVID!" Anyone else out there experiencing the same? Or perhaps it's just my group of coworkers and friends. We first responders do have a habit of meeting death and fear head on with humor. But just because we're joking, it certainly doesn't mean we're not stressing it too. So, for anyone who has said we should have canceled this AFL footy season and just started over next year, I get it. There are risks. There are incredible expenses. Entire teams and their families living in hubs. Players having to choose between family and work. The challenges are enormous, sometimes seemingly insurmountable. And for what? A game? Well, yes. But then for many of us, footy is so much more than a game, isn't it? Aside from the financial loss to everyone who works with or even adjacent to the AFL, if there was no season this year, I, for one, am so incredibly grateful for the diversion it affords. The luxury, even, of worrying about the accuracy of my team's set shots on goal, instead of, did I just touch my eye with a contaminated finger? You get my point, I think. So thank you to all the clubs, supporters, broadcasters, journalists, and the AFL itself for somehow keeping this dog and pony show on the air. It hasn't always been pretty, to be sure, but damn if this last week's action didn't seem to lift quite a bit, and it was beautiful to behold. So, let's take a look at the Round 7 action. First off, on Thursday night, we had the much-anticipated matchup between Collingwood and Geelong. I was so caught up in the Cats' second-half performance against Brisbane in Round 6 that I totally disregarded the intense defensive pressure that Magpies brought down on the Hawks. Well, it was much of the same this week, with the Pies shutting down the Cats by a score of 57-35. Next, on Friday Night Footy, we had Essendon and my Western Bulldogs. I know I have been harping on about the Bulldogs' young ruckman Tim English improving his game in previous episodes, but let me tell you, it looked like he arrived in this match. Outside of the ruck, he continued to impress, his agility and ball control defying his own lanky frame. But his delicate hitouts to advantage was something on an entirely different level than what we have seen. And more often than not, advantage was in the form of Marcus Bontempelli. Also, the debut of last year's Bulldogs' first draft pick, Cody Waitman, or Flea as he is affectionately known, was more fantastic than I certainly could have hoped for. Not many debutants take a spectacular mark with their first touch, and then slot a checkside banana goal from 40 meters out on the boundary line with the first kick in your AFL career. It seems his new nickname might just be Cody 19. Not just because of his Guernsey number, but because the excitement his arrival caused went viral throughout the Bulldogs players and supporters alike. With the huge splash made by the young pups, the work of our veterans almost went unnoticed. Bont is the Bont, routinely making the impossible seem mundane. Mitch Wallace had a superb day at the office, and I can think of no one I'd rather have making decisions with the ball when things go wrong in the trenches of the midfield than Liberatore. But let me just say a little bit about the workhorse that is Jack McRae. I had a conversation the other day with my Bulldog buddy Rich, and we were talking about how I could always pick out McRae anywhere on the field, even if the camera was in geosynchronous orbit. Not by his number or hairstyle, but by his unique and seemingly ungainly running and kicking style. He looks to have the posture of an osteoporotic grandmother, and his legs move like one of those novelty rubber spiders that you toss at a window pane and watch crawl/roll down towards the sill. And, just when he looks to be wrapped up in a sure tackle, one of his legs swings out at an angle human joints usually don't bend at, and he kicks the footy 60 meters down the field. On target, too. And he, more times than not, has more disposals than just about anyone on either team. Absolutely one of the unsung heroes of not just the Bulldogs, but the entire league. All these, and more, individual stellar efforts, combined with the solid work of the team as a whole, made for a Bulldog performance that was too much for the high-flying Bombers to handle. The Doggies were up by 10 points at halftime, and went on to win by a score of 93-51, actually recording the highest score of the round. For whatever reason, the Bulldogs seem to have the Dons figured out as of late. In fact, Bevo, as the head coach of the Dogs, has not lost to Essendon since he took over the position before the 2015 season. Okay, moving on to those other teams. Saturday started out with the Giants and Lions. The Lions, dressed not unlike one of their parent clubs, the Brisbane Bears, went out to an early lead and stayed there all day, despite a third-quarter surge by GWS. Brisbane won by a final score of 88-68 and secured their second-place spot on the ladder. Then we had the Swans and the Suns. Gold Coast, in their blue clash jerseys, hit the front early, poured it on in the second quarter, and never looked back. Isaac Rankin continues to impress, but he was far from the only Sun to put a hurting on the young Swans. When it was all over, Gold Coast beat Sydney by a score of 92-60. Saturday finished up with the Tigers and Kangaroos. In perhaps the most one-sided match of the entire season, at least so far, the Tigers curb-stomped the Kangaroos to the tune of 77-23, despite Higgins' impressive effort. In fact, the Roos didn't even get a goal until just before halftime. It got worse as well for North, as several injuries were racked up in this losing effort. Sunday began with Carlton against Port Adelaide. Probably the game of the round, if not the entire season. Just a thriller all day long, though at first it looked like the Power would run away with it. But then the Blues fought back, and it all ended with a game-winning goal after the final siren, giving Port the win by a score of 64-61. Breathing a sigh of relief, the Power stay on top of the ladder, a game clear of everyone else. Next, we had the Hawks and D's. So, I either really underestimated the problems Hawthorn is having, or I underestimated Melbourne's team altogether. The Hawks scored first, but by the end of the first quarter, it was pretty much all over. The Demons went on to win the match by a score of 91-48. They currently sit 3-3, with a game in hand, too. Then there was the Western Derby between Freo and West Coast. It is always a heated affair when these two teams meet to fight over West Australian bragging rights. Though the ledger is pretty even overall, in recent years, it has been the Shiny Eagles who often best the Dockworkers from the other side of the river, and once again the trend repeated itself. Though it was a close score early on, by the middle of the second quarter, West Coast started to pull away, and Freo wasn't able to catch up. Josh Kennedy of the Eagles took home the Glendenning Medal for best on ground in the Derby, and the Eagles won by a score of 62-32. Finally, on Monday, there was Adelaide and St. Kilda. No real surprises here, but to be honest, the match was very entertaining, despite some rather controversial umpiring. But in the end, St. Kilda pulled ahead and won by a score of 78-55. Okay, that's it for last round's wrap-up. But I have to tell you, my head is still spinning with this latest news that recently came out. The fixture for rounds 9 through 12 was just released, and all I can say is this: get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Wow. In an attempt to deal with the COVID crisis and the hub living situation, the AFL is putting on 33 games in 20 days, with games every single day and a few doubleheaders on both Wednesday and Thursday. Several clubs will have multiple breaks between games consisting of only 4 days. Round 9 starts on Wednesday, July 29th, and the action continues straight on through to the last match of Round 12 on Monday, August 17th. I know I'm not alone trying to figure out just how to schedule my podcast releases during this approaching Footy NATO. Even seasoned footy television personalities have voiced some concerns about being able to do their shows. Well, all I can say is that I will give the same answer just about every footy player gives when asked about the big picture. And that is, we're just going to take this one game at a time. How all this relates to injuries, fatigue, travel, quarantines, and so on, and what clubs can best cope with everything, remains to be seen in this unique and fascinating 2020 AFL season. But before the fertilizer hits the ventilator, let's all just take a deep breath and look ahead to round 8 for now. First, on Thursday Night Footy, we have the Suns taking on my Bulldogs. I am so excited for this, as Gold Coast are the new darlings of the league with their multiple new, exciting, and insanely talented young stars. I'm really hoping the season debut of Isaac Rankin is overrated, but I'm pretty sure it's not, and it's just a little bit terrifying. And in the game of AFL's rock, paper, scissors, the Suns just seem to have matched up well against the Doggies lately. Or maybe we have just underestimated them. But I don't think anyone is likely to do that anymore. Coach Stewie Doo, fresh off of his contract extension, will have his team ready for their first ever Thursday night primetime game. And the Bulldogs have better be prepared. Fortunately, the Doggies have some new and exciting and insanely talented young stars as well, including yet another debutant in Cal Porter, the 5th of the season so far, and I cannot wait to see how they all match up with the Suns. If you have access to ESPN3, my fellow Americans, then you can catch the match. Otherwise, like I always say, go get yourself a WatchAFL.com subscription. Or better yet, get it through your favorite club's international membership, or even through the United States Australian Football League if you haven't picked a favorite club yet. Trust me when I say that the Watch AFL app is the greatest streaming service a footy fan living up and over could ever ask for. Then, on Friday Night Footy, we have GWS and Richmond in the grand final rematch. Last time these two teams played, it was a slaughter, and the Giants will want to redeem themselves. Unfortunately for GWS, the Tigers seem to have found the premiership caliber form of late, and the Giants continue to struggle despite their talented list. The Orange Menace will need to pull together as a team to erase the indignity of last year. And in America, you can see this match on Fox Sports 1. Next, to start off Super Saturday, we have North Melbourne against Carlton. Two teams who seem to be going in completely different directions, despite the Blues losing by the narrowest of margins last round. But the Roos showed some serious promise early this season, and sooner or later, you just know they will bounce back. But then there's Eddie Betts and his Blues Travelers to deal with, and that, my friends, is no easy task. The days of penciling in 4 points whenever you saw Carlton on your schedule are long gone. Then we have the Swans and Hawks, two clubs who, quite frankly, are having disappointing seasons. Injury and inexperience are at the top of the list of Sydney's problems, and a lot smarter people than me seem to be having a tough time figuring out what's going on at the not-so-happy club of Hawthorn these days. If you haven't already, head on over to WatchAFL.com to be able to join this contest. The last match on Saturday gives us Port Adelaide and St. Kilda. Both teams are coming off of wins. The power train seems to keep on rolling down the track and away from the rest of the pack. Here in the States, tune in to Fox Sports 1 to see if the Saints can derail their plans. Sunday's triple header starts out with Adelaide and Essendon. The Crows are still winless this season, and the Bombers are not looking to make it happen on their watch. I'm looking for the Dons to bounce back from last round and fly high once again. Looks like you'll have to boot up the Watch AFL app for this one. Then we have West Coast and Collingwood. The two powerhouses collide in a rematch of the 2018 Grand Final. Heading into the Eagles' Nest, the Pies will definitely be missing DeGoey as he is out with a hand injury. But that doesn't mean their intense defensive pressure will let up at all. In the USA, you can catch the game on Fox Sports too. Last match on Sunday gives us the Demons and Lions. The D's were impressive last round, especially with the play of Gawney and Petrarca, and seemed to be getting it together as a team. But Brisbane are really going strong with some of the competition's most electric players in Cameron and Neal. Here in the States, this will also be shown on Fox Sports too. Finally, on Monday Night Footy, we have Freo and Geelong. Gary Ablett Jr. will not be playing as he had to leave the hub to return to Melbourne for family reasons. Also, I'm not sure if Captain Joe Selwood will be back from his hamstring injury or not. Together, if they're both out, the Cats have some huge holes to fill, and the Dockers would definitely be looking to exploit them too. Speaking of injuries, I am also very curious to see if Freo's own captain, Nat Fyfe, will be back in the lineup himself. Here in the US of A, you can see this game on ESPN too. Well, I think that should just about wrap it up for now. As always, I thank you so much for listening. I would be so thankful if you would be kind enough to share a link to this podcast with your friends and family. And in all honesty, I wouldn't care if you shared it with people you didn't like that much either. After all, it's all about growing this amazing sport of AFL football that we all love. This podcast can be found on your favorite podcast player or at straydogfooty.podbean.com. And I would love to hear your feedback. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at @straydogfooty and by email at straydogfooty@yahoo.com. I also just wanted to mention that I am not endorsed by or officially affiliated with either the Australian Football League or the Western Bulldogs beyond being a huge fan and supporter. Likewise, I am not endorsed or affiliated with Peg and the Rejected, but I am a fan of their music. I would like to thank them for the use of their song, Red, White, Black, and Blue, which I used a portion of as the intro to this episode. I will also play us out, like I always do, to their entire song, and of course, I'll leave a link in the show notes to their great music. Before I go, I need to send out my condolences to the family and friends of former Richmond Tiger Shane Tuck, who passed away at the young age of 38 on Monday morning, leaving behind a wife and 2 children. Shane played 173 games for the Tigers before retiring in 2013. He was also part of an extended football family. His father Michael, playing an amazing 426 games for Hawthorn, and together they sit third on the father-son combined numbers of games list with a total of 599. Shane's brother Travis also played for Hawthorn, and his mother Faye is the sister of Gary Ablett Sr., making him the cousin of Gary Ablett Jr. The Tigers will pay tribute to Shane by wearing black armbands during Friday night's match against GWS. So take care out there, be safe, be kind to each other, and I'll see you next time on Stray Dog Footy.